Welcome to the Pantheon Plus Rewind.
Happy Sunday, everybody, and welcome to episode 51 of The Rewind. If you're new to the show, we're a podcast that features conversation on the upcoming indie MMORPG Pantheon, Rise of the Fallen. Every week, we dig into community discussions around the game, provide news updates, and talk about hot topics being discussed around various social media platforms. We share our experience with MMORPGs, our opinions, and help hopefully broadcast to the greater community their thoughts and what we hope is bring in a wider audience of fans and hopefully new discoverers of Pantheon. Well, we love when you join us for the live premiere of The Rewind every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. Don't forget that you're also able to download this podcast on Spotify, iTunes, and most other major podcast sites for on-the-go listening. As always, this podcast is dual-boxed, and I am flanked by my Canadian co-host, Theric. So, Theric, how's it going this week?
I'm doing really, really well, man. I had to go into the office quite a bit this week, so a little bit more than I'm used to, sort of getting back up to speed. So I'm a little tired this week. But some of the things I like about going into the office is that I do have that sort of drive-in time, and I've gotten away from listening to a lot of audiobooks, which I used to do quite a bit. And I'm getting back into it now. And I've started reading a book that was recommended to me by a lot of people. That's The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I've never read any of Brandon Sanderson's stuff before. And
that was one JN really liked, right? As well?
Exactly. Yeah. That's where I started because he recommended it. He said he talked about it and I was like, oh, I got to check this out. And then a few people in Guild Chat were sort of saying the same thing. So I'm a couple hours in and it's really, really good. It's you can tell it's going to be this sort of epic narrative, and I really enjoy that kind of thing. It's kind of cool. It has two parts, like a male narrator for some parts and a female narrator for other parts, which is obviously unique to the audiobook. So that's kind of cool, and it keeps it fresh. And it's like a 45-hour long book too, so you kind of need to do that.
Wow.
Yeah, and then the other night we were playing for our MMORPG Classes 101. Nathan Napalm recommended the Talisman by Stephen King, so I've got that on my list as well. So anyway, just trying to get like a good, have a good tale going at all times. I enjoy that. So yeah, that's what I've been up to. How about yourself?
Yeah, it takes me literally. I think if I leave my house, I can get to work in 3 minutes. So
no audiobooks for you.
Yeah, no audiobooks for me. It's pretty close. Maybe when I move, or I don't know, maybe we'll see. I've never listened to an audiobook ever. How weird is that? I usually,
takes time to get used to. It's a different experience, right? I prefer physical books still. I really do. But the problem with physical books for me is that when I'm at home and the option is there to read a physical book, I always have the option to go on my iPad and like watch YouTube videos as well. So I can't do that when I'm driving.
Now you're speaking my language for sure.
Yeah. It's like, I gotta find an opportunity where I'm not tempted by those other things to indulge in books. And
I lied. I think I did actually listen to one audiobook. I got into reading leadership books for a while. And there was one that was recommended to me, and it's called David and Goliath. And it's uses the story of David and Goliath, but to talk about like people looking at odds against them, or the whole underdog versus mega corporation story, and sort of debuffs that whole like David is an underdog. And they kind of go through the story in a big way. They can say, well, in the scenario David set up in, he was far away from Goliath. Goliath was slow, and they went into like medical studies on Goliath because of his size. He was probably giganticism, and here's some of the things that were harmful for him, and he couldn't see well. And David was a world-class slinger, and here's what he can. So like all these things, like we often look at the most obvious thing about something, and we determine the underdog and granted victor, if you want to call it that. But in reality, a lot of times it's reversed. It's an interesting concept of like how to run business, how to build teams, how to overcome things in front of you. But I think that's the only audiobook I ever listened to. It was okay. It was pretty good.
Sounds like a good one. Yeah. I mean, that kind of stuff's totally useful. All that psychology and sort of the social psychology and all that stuff. It's fascinating. So yeah, cool.
Yeah, I'm such a nerd. I don't read much, but when I do, it's like leadership books or like the old World of Warcraft Chronicle books. That's it.
Pretty different ends of the spectrum there, but there's some similarities, I'm sure.
You strive to be like Arthas. So anyway, I don't want to keep us here at the very beginning intro for the entire show, Rant and Raven, but awesome to hear you're at least getting some enjoyment out of having to go back to the office. I do love that. So that's good stuff.
Definitely.
So next up in the intro here, we have to make sure to thank our raid party, and again, a raid party. All of those who donated last week during the rewind, we really greatly appreciate it. So we had a total of 10, and then you add me and Theric, so that's 12. That's a good 2-group raid party in my opinion.
Yeah.
So we had We Smoke Bitcoins, our Darkmere Summoner friend, Dustin Harms, our Archive Druid friend, Annoying Llama, who's not so annoying, Human Monk, Nathan Hawkins, Human Warrior, Andrew Wittis, which is a Human Paladin, Ziplox, my fellow rogue, he's a Darkmere, Brian Reck, Gnome Summoner, Crow Singing, Halfling Druid, and I realized, Crow, you didn't call us out. I accidentally put an Elf Druid last week and probably for a couple weeks, and I reread it. I'm like, wait, Crow Singing is a halfling, so I fixed it.
I didn't catch that either. Wow, how did we not notice that? What's wrong with us?
I don't know. Unless it was just last week. Maybe I moved stuff around and messed it up. But also a really special thanks to Sparrow, our Elf Druid friend, and Bounty Code, our Human Paladin, both of which who also were part of the giveaway last week, which was awesome. We want to thank you guys for giving out that $100 pledge to somebody in the community. Theric, were you able to talk to that person at all after they got it? Were they excited? What was that like?
Yeah, actually, it's gone so well. Every time we've done one, I've had no problems. He and I connected on email and on Discord, and we got it done. And he's very, very happy with it. He said he's listened to the show since episode 1, so he likes the show.
That's awesome.
You know, he posted an intro on the forums, which I'm actually going to read a bit later too. So,
that's incredible. I love it.
Yeah.
Cool. So again, if you want to join our party up on the screen there and get a shout out, you can donate during the show with the premiere. There's that little button at the chat. And if you do, make sure to give your future Pantheon race and class with your comment so we can include you in that raid group. As always, a huge thank you to everybody who chooses to support this show. It is very much appreciated. Thank you guys for that. So you would think now we'd say, let's get on with the show. But Theric, we have one more thing to talk about in today's intro. And that final thing we need to talk about is the upcoming Pantheon 2021 Dungeon Group Draft. Coming up on April 15th, obviously this year. So we'll be, it's funny in the notes, I put 2021, of course. So April 15th, we'll be starting the show a little earlier than our typical Pantheon Plus U show at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So last year's draft was a little bit longer, but it was a great time. And anyone who's gone back who didn't know about it and checked it out said it was funny. They enjoyed it. So I really hope to see you all there live for it. It just makes the show that much better. We'll read your comments. We'll laugh. It's a good time. So today, a couple days ago, we put out our poll on Twitter to determine the draft order this year. So last year we included the community in the poll, and surprise, who got the number one pick? The community who voted for the community. So I decided this year that the community just gets the number one pick, and you guys can then all vote for the order for the rest of the teams. This year's teams are Team Visionary Realms, which Theric, you ready? This is an announcement. We're actually excited. Yeah, right. We're actually excited to announce that the team for Visionary Realms will be drafted by a longtime VR member, Madaki, the emotional support ogre. So we're really excited to have him live with us all night, drafting his team and joking back and forth with us. Madaki, thank you for being a part, and thank you to VR for wanting to jump into this nutty show. It should be really fun. So
totally.
We'll also feature Team Napalm, Team Drac, and Team Minus. Theric's going to be our host for the show once again, and I promise you do not want to miss this one. Keep up to date with our Twitter as we announce more details and get the hype going. So Theric, any thoughts on this year's draft that you want to share?
Yeah, I did want to remind all the teams that are drafting that as host, I have considerable power as to either glorify or ridicule your picks, just so you know. I'm not above bribes. And if you think you pulled off a strategically genius move, or, maybe you didn't, maybe it's the worst pick since Ryan Leaf went number 1 overall, that might just be a matter of tone and context and when I announce your pick. So I'm just saying, if you, the host with the most has some influence here over the success of your draft. So, hit me up, Discord, ping me on Twitter, whatever you want to do. But no, in all seriousness, this is so much fun. We had such a good time last year, and we were talking before we started recording here about, this is sort of like our Pantheon Plus, sort of like the awards show for the year. Like, we just have such fun with this, and it's such a big production. We've been working on this, and give a shout out to Drac. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's been working like a madman trying to get these prep done for this, and you as well, Minus. I know you've been hard at work slaving over your technical details there, but it all pays off in the end because we just have a great time. So I'm totally looking forward to it.
Yeah, we should be a little fancier this year, a little cleaner presentation. I'm excited for that. I learned a couple new things to try, so should be fun. That way, none of the technology gets in the way. It's just about the fun. It's about the banter. It's about the community interaction. So should be a good time.
And if you want to go check out there's a mock draft that our friend Mel over at Pantheon.plus has done. He's no spoilers, but Mel is a wise man, so you might be well served to go over and read a little mock draft as what might happen that night. So go check it out.
All right, so a long intro today, but we are ready to go. All the information's out there. The thank yous are out there. What's going on in the world is out there, and we're ready for the draft. So, Derek, if it's okay with you, let's get started.
It's all good.
This week in Visionary Realms news and notes.
All right, so this week in VR news and notes, I thought we'd take a bit of a different approach, as the Twitter questions this week were not sort of as engaging for a conversational piece as some of the other ones that we've covered. And it's always good, in my opinion, to shake things up a little bit here and there. So one of the complaints we frequently hear is that VR communication can at times be a bit tough to find without digging to get that clarity. So with that said, sometimes on the unofficial Discord, we can actually get some pretty interesting details from the Pantheon team. So today, I wanted to dig around a bit and provide some interesting answers that you could have possibly missed if you weren't following the unofficial Discord or you just weren't there at the time. And all of these comments and answers actually come from Joppa over the last few months. So what do you think there? Good idea? Should we get into this and break these down a little bit?
Yeah, this is a great idea. We've talked about doing this before. We've said we need to do like a dev post tracker sort of thing. And I know during the week we were talking about this idea, and I looked at what you've got here, and man, this is great stuff. Like you went through the whole thing. Like you went back several months, even I think 6 months back, and found some of these dev posts, and they're excellent. So we're gonna have a lot to talk about here.
Yeah. So big thing to mention is these are all current, and I believe all of these should be, true fact. So we're reading right from Joppa. If you have questions about any of these things, this should hopefully give you some answers. And like I said, these are directly from Joppa. So they're going to be quick hit on topics, some a little bit longer than others. So here we go. So topic 1 is discussing the networking upgrades in the universal rendering pipeline, which you often see referred to as URP. So Joppa was kind of asked about this because everyone's sort of wondering how important is it? How long is it going to take? What does this mean for refactoring again? Why wasn't this done earlier? He gets asked a lot of questions. So he actually jumped into the Discord, and I'm going to read you, I'll say quote started and end quote, so you know when I'm not talking as Joppa. But here we go. This is Joppa's quote. So starting quote, "We're not just integrating the new networking system." So we're not just integrating the new networking system. We've been slowly hooking up various aspects of it all along the way since the refactor. What's left is giving ourselves the final uninterrupted time to finish the rest of the transition. It is a massive undertaking and exciting that we're close to finishing it. Networking governs just about everything you do in an MMO. Basic and traditional things like login, data packet server, zone capacity, etc. And also more modern things like terrain, asset streaming, nuances in NPC AI, etc. I'm confident that our networking solution is going to be one of our standout strengths. Waiting sucks, but the URP and networking pieces are the last of our major tech debt hurdles. So the fact that we're talking about those and have a bead on finishing them is very good news. End quote. So, Derek, I don't know where you stood on all this or where your thoughts were, but what'd you think of his discussion there and what stood out to you?
Yeah, what stood out to me was how it's important to differentiate between the refactor and networking upgrades. Like, I know it may seem obvious to some people, but a lot of people who don't follow the game as closely as we do, again, those things can get conflated. And I think there is a lot of cross sort of pollination between the technical work that they're doing, and they did the refactor, and these networking upgrades are not the same thing, and Joppa differentiates right off the hop. And then the other takeaway is what he says at the end, like the fact that they're even talking about this right now, right? It's important that they're setting this out right now. It's a big task, and if they weren't sort of close to being through the process, they wouldn't be talking about it, right? So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah. It's an important bring up by Joppa. I'm glad that you included this part.
Yeah, so there's a couple more pieces to this topic. This is the longer topic here to discuss as we go through quite a few. But he was questioned about, why are you doing this now? Why wasn't this solid foundation early on? Like, isn't that how you should develop? Kind of taking a couple jabs at the team. But Joppa, he doesn't mind that. Like he will take any feedback and he takes it to heart and he thinks about it. And he answered back. He said, "That's definitely how it works in an ideal situation." This is quoting Joppa here. I would even say typically, but the expertise required to build a networking stack that can support a full-scale MMO is, as you've all previously mentioned, not easy to come by. So in our situation, we're having to do it a bit backwards, since that expertise came onto the team just shy of 2 years ago and spearheaded a megalithic refactor along the way. He says, URP is much more than visuals. There will be sizable improvements there for sure, but far more importantly, it provides the framework for our terrain and asset streaming tech. And he puts utilizing our new networking stack. It goes hand in hand with how we're building the game to run well. End quote from Joppa there. And the last piece I'll tie into that, another common discussion piece that kind of came up in this same conversation is there's a lot of people that believe the Unity engine just can't handle large scale engagements or too many people in the world. It's a common thing said, and it's strange to me because there's usually not a lot of facts behind it. It's just thrown out there a lot, which is weird. And I'm sure somebody in chat, you'll say, well, here's an article or here's a game it didn't work on. But it just seems like a very weird thing because Unity is a base engine and people then design around it a lot. I think like when they're talking about their network stack and stuff, they're going to be fine. It's not going to be a Unity thing. So here's what Joppa specifically said about that in regards to the conversation. He said, Unity networking is not, will not be a factor or bottleneck in determining our raid sizes or performance. So nothing to worry about, everybody. From the inside there, Unity is not going to be an issue. Their networking is their strength when they put in their network stack and what they've created. So nothing to worry about there.
Yeah, I would recommend everybody go back and listen to the VIP Roundtable with Kyle Olson. That's basically what this is all about. And I learned a ton from that roundtable. We talked about it on the show afterwards, and I think a lot of this is very difficult just to understand from a technical standpoint for the average person. And, we tend to look for easy answers when it's something we just don't understand or don't want to invest a lot of time in. But I think in this case, because Joppa is being very, speaking plainly about this, that to have a base understanding of what he's talking about is really important here. One of the things that he said that really sticks out in my mind when thinking about this part of the process is there's a lot of things to remember that when it comes to the tech aspect of developing an MMO, it's the least watchable part, right, of the development process, right? Yeah. We should brace ourselves for this a little, because what Joppa's saying here is like, look, we've got another piece to go here. We're getting there. We've got these tech debts we have to overcome. We have to pay off. But so as the community, I think we should sort of like keep that in mind, because it's fun to see models. It's fun to see zones. It's fun to see animations, right? But there are times when it's just not going to be that entertaining. And actually, I'm amazed, sometimes at looking at what VR has done to be able to avoid, some of that, or been able to keep the tech stuff that's not interesting in the background for the most part.
The fact that we've been able to do 51 episodes of this show and the game's still in pre-alpha.
Well, that's us. We're able to sort of just, we have less restrictions, and we're sort of able to be more creative with our conversations that we have or whatever than they are. But everybody wants this beautiful open development process where we have access to everything, and you have to just realize, when it's something visual, or if it's not something visual or tangible that has an appeal like that, we can get a little cranky sometimes. So, when they talk about Unity and networking and stacks and all that kind of stuff, you just have to understand that, it's sort of hard to explain, one, and two, it's not pretty necessarily, right? So, yeah.
Awesome. Good points. So topic 2 is about the class releases. So Derek, I don't know if you've seen this, but there's been a lot of confusion with the way that the last newsletter or the producer's letter kind of worded about that Alpha 1, getting to Alpha 1, because they talk about the fact that Monk, Ranger, and Summoner are going to be tougher to implement. And then like it's followed right next to it that, maybe we will only launch with 9 out of 12 classes. But those two statements, I don't believe were meant to be hand in hand. So there's been a lot of confusion about that. So what happened is that everybody was kind of asking, and Joppa jumped in to kind of clarify something he's already stated before with us actually on Pantheon Plus U. But he actually just came out, and here's a quote from Joppa again on the unofficial Discord. He said, "Monk, Ranger, and Summoner are the next 3 on the list. Rereading the letter, Ben didn't say Ranger and Summoner wouldn't be in, but that they'd have some more complex systems mechanics supporting them. That's why I'm focusing on them earlier, to make sure they have enough time to be fully stand up and shine." So
yeah, I'm so glad you included this one, Minus. Like this is a comment that I saw when he made it, and I wanted to reference it a bunch of times because you can imagine when I read the letter, I definitely misinterpreted what was being said because it wasn't clear about the status of those classes. Hearing that your class isn't going to be potentially included in alpha is tough. It's tough to hear. Yeah. And that is what I took away from it. And, as a person who loves their class, I've learned from doing content with you that people love their classes more than anything.
Yeah.
We can do shows about the classes all day, every day, week after week, and people would never get sick of it because that's just their identity is their class. And it's the number one thing people want to know about. So when Joppa clarified this, I was really glad to see that. It doesn't mean that Ranger's not necessarily going to be there for alpha. It means that they have to focus on getting that done first. There's some technical aspects that they need to really work on. And I don't want a half-assed Ranger, right? Like I want them to get it right, So I'm glad Joppa's putting some effort into it, or more effort, and giving it the attention. Nobody else, people who love monks don't want half-assed monks or half-assed summoners. In alpha, again, we've said this a million times, but there's tons of people going to be coming on board, right? Yeah. They talk about polish. Classes should be polished. That should be the priority, right? So, learn from us, VR. Classes are king. Everybody loves their classes, right? So
I don't think I need to say anything on that topic. Everyone knows how I feel about classes. So
yeah, I know you're right, and you're right. That's there's a reason for that. And, the other takeaway from this, does it just strike you that Joppa never sleeps? Like he says here, that's why I'm focusing on them earlier to make sure they have enough time to fully stand up. Like, is there anything that guy doesn't do at VR? Like, it seems like he's involved in everything. So.
Is it funny to say that one of the most recognizable faces who's often talked about, who's often celebrated, is still underrated? Yeah, but here's the thing. And this is a true thing. Joppa became the face. I don't think he ever wanted to be the face. I think he would have loved to just stay behind the scenes a little more and work on all this stuff. And because of that, because of how much he does and being the face, a lot of people point to Joppa and say, oh, Joppa does this, Joppa does that. I want to be very clear, not disrespecting Joppa at all, but that everyone on the team puts that level of effort in. And that's another reason why I believe in them so much, because while we may see Joppa and we see all these hats he has on, everybody does. Like every single person on that small team does just as much, and they all work just as hard, and they all deserve their credit. So I just want to make sure to say that, as we kind of reference that. So I think it's important.
Yeah, good point.
All right, topic 3, a very quick update. We haven't heard from Torque in a while. So Jimmy Lane. So there was a quick update. Someone asked, what's Torque up to? So Joppa actually responded. He said, quote, Torque is a rock star. He's currently working on the biome related assets. Most recently, the trees that we'll be using throughout Eastern Kingsreach. So we may actually see trees. Yeah, we may see trees. I'm a little sad. I like the little cloud marshmallow trees. I really do. I kind of like them.
By the time this game comes out, Torque's never going to see a tree again in his life. He's going to move to the middle of New York City or something like that. So he's completely in an urban environment. But hey, what about Eastern Kingsreach here? That's kind of interesting. Look at the map. Look at what's in Eastern Kingsreach. It's we're talking about the Wild's End, the Vale of Azarus, which we haven't heard anything about ever.
Yeah, I'm not trusting that map anymore.
Yeah, well, it's all we have at this point, so
I know.
I'm trusting it because there's nobody else to. There are no other options.
No, you're 100% right. I'm just busting balls, but yeah.
Yeah. So, we've seen Wild's End ages and ages ago, and one of the earliest videos of Pantheon shows some Wild's End. I'm sure it looks completely different now, but interesting stuff.
Okay. So topic number 4 is cleric gameplay. So for all the cleric fans out there, we haven't seen much on cleric, hear much about clerics. I thought this was fun. Somebody asked about the cleric and, the fact that they have some melee abilities. Joppa clarified that clerics, and this is a quote, clerics aren't designed to be melee healers, as in needing to be melee to generate the resource they use for healing. However, they should be more adept at getting into melee range, contributing some melee damage, taking a few hits, for example, more than the shaman or druid. So,
yeah, kind of bit of a cool bit of class identity there going on. I really like that the Pantheon cleric isn't the sort of robe wearing acolyte type we see in other sort of fantasy universes sometimes. Making them sort of able to get in and mix it up in melee a little bit, sort of gets that gamble in there, right? You don't ever want your primary healer really, trying to get in there too much, but sometimes I think they get bored and they kind of step into the fray a little bit, and then, you lose your cleric, and then you're kind of screwed. So
yeah. No, cleric to me has always been the most interesting healer. The plate, the being able to be in melee, the powerhouse healer. That's the kind of stuff I like. I like that reactive healer. Someone takes a big hit, boom, big heal, right?
Yeah.
Or shielding type of stuff. So I like the cleric a lot, and we'll probably have a cleric ult. So
yeah, agreed.
All right, topic 5. This is Derek, you got to help me here on this one.
I don't know if I can help you here.
I just do not understand the frustration about this, but and you know who leads the charge on this? Basgrim. Yeah, Basgrim is just.
I'm right there with them.
I don't get it. I don't get it. So levels on the nameplates was brought up, and I find this interesting because this is what I suggested, and this is sort of what WoW does. And I'm not saying like I just kind of suggested it in our circle. But here's what Joppa has to say on levels on nameplates. He says, we still plan to show levels in the nameplates, but a change that we'll be making soon is to only show the level of NPCs up to 5 levels above you. Beyond that, it'll read as question marks. So to me, that is no different than a red con. But the thing is, if it's question marks, you get a red con still, right? You don't know how high it is above you, but you do know when it's just slightly a red con. I think that's the best of both worlds. I think that works. We've seen it work in other MMORPGs. I think that it provides you enough data in a game that is so dangerous and you can die instantly on one wrong pull. I just think that it works. I think that I don't think we can run in Pantheon with the con system. We've talked about this a lot. With the con system we used to have in EQ, it needs to be evolved. So I like this, but again, I know, and apparently you, but I know there's just this massive push out there against this. Yeah. And I just think that, I guess people would call this a quality of life piece, but with the world so dangerous, like how close are you going to need to get to con something or figure out that it's too late, you're dead? Like, I don't think it should be that punishing to where you have to die every time you figure out, how strong an NPC is. So I like it. Yeah. And keep in mind, like something 5 levels ahead of you, even if you're 40 and it's 42 and you can see it, you don't know how strong that 42 is. It could be an undercon, right? So
yeah, and I think that's a good change. I like that. It's closer to what I think it should be. I just the numbers thing. It just takes too much of the mystery out of it for me. I want to learn from experience and feel rather than learning. Like I'll die to figure out something's level. Like I'll take that hit to figure out the level because then I go back and I look at it. But so I'm still not cool with this necessarily. I think we were playing Dark Age of Camelot the other night, and even as old as that game is, they do it. They don't show you the numbers, and they have that sort of plus, if something's hard, and you've got the purple and orange and red, all that kind of stuff. So you have an idea. I like the idea of something's level better than just the number. I don't like the number, but
it's the same thing though.
It is at the end of the day, but it's also about how you want your information conveyed, right? So it's just a preference.
I gotcha. Next one. Ooh.
Your favorite topic.
It's my favorite topic. So topic 6. So I guess there was a big discussion going on about wardrobe or transmog systems. And I promise, I don't think I was involved, which is kind of neat. I might have gotten involved after, but I was not involved. So Joppa had this to say about a wardrobe or transmog system. Very important. This is a very definitive answer. He says, let me clarify again. I am not against a wardrobe system that is designed in a way that does not compromise our goals for item identity and prestige. If I put the time in and effort to slay Sleepless and loot a sword that I love, I have earned that item. If I love the way it looks and want to use that skin when I ride into town, I can get behind a player's choice and incentive to do that. I also think players having a toggle where they can see the true look of what other players have equipped is a right that all players should have. Now he also says, what I said earlier is that this kind of system is not currently planned. That does not mean we will not revisit it down the road at a more appropriate point in development. Eric, thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad it's not something they're focused on right now. I don't think they need to focus on this right now. I'm glad that maybe it'll just keep getting pushed down the list. I actually am not against the transmog system. We've talked about this, but it's about the getting the item first, and once you have it, it's like what Joppa is saying is pretty much on track with what I think too. I don't think it's something that they need to work on right now. Item prestige is the key takeaway here in my mind, and that's what it's about. It is definitely about item prestige, and as long as that is the vision and their focus is on item prestige, I don't think you can go too far. And I'm glad that he stepped in and clarified this, because this gets, like, as you know, more than anybody else.
Yeah, it's a wild conversation.
It is a wild conversation. It gets out of control real quick because you get into these slippery slopes and all that kind of stuff. So
bunny costumes, all this nonsense, right?
Yeah, you get into all that, right?
I love what he has to say. And for those that, I joke about a lot of things, guys, and I'm sure most of the people who listen to us understand that about me now. Remember, the transmog system that I love is, you had to earn every piece. If you didn't earn it and soul bind it to yourself, you didn't have it. And was it easier sometimes to get certain pieces? Sure. Could you go back when you were high level and get it so you could get that transmog piece? Sure. But I don't want a system where you just buy all your transmogs. I don't want that. I want to earn it. And if I earn it, I want to be able to show it off in the future. I think it creates a way for an item's look to live on forever. And I think that's important. And I think that adds to prestige, my personal opinion. So
agreed. Yeah.
Okay. The next topic here is, this is very wordy. I'm going to stumble on this a little bit, Theric. You might have to help me at the end in breaking this down a little bit. So This is topic 7, and it's about downranking spells. Now, I don't know why, but everybody just really gets upset that Pantheon's not going to have downranking. And there's some people who've even accused them as this being like a huge change in direction and they're getting away from promises. And this is another hostile topic, and I am not into downranking because I believe it creates more bloat, and I just don't want bloat. And I like the limited action set, which I don't think plays well with downranking. But rather than hear what I have to say about it, let's go ahead and get into what Joppa has to say. So, quote, regarding downranking of abilities, I'm not sure why that is viewed as a direction change. I've talked before about a difference between vision, a high level philosophy, and the actual design of a thing, which are the specific ways that philosophy manifests in the game's architecture and the experiences of playing it. I was asked by Brad to sit down with Pantheon's high-level design doc, The Vision, in 2015 and imbue my ideas into it. It essentially became a co-vision at this point, and is where climates, atmospheres, artifacts, the perception system, dispositions, mastery, and climbing all became a part of Pantheon's vision. Since then, I've been working directly on how these things would actually manifest into gameplay, working on the actual design of the game. He goes on to say, so the issue of downranking abilities is a specific way in which the ability progression and mastery systems are being designed. It is, in a way, not related to the vision of the game, but more the specific way the vision is being executed. Lot there, a lot to unpack.
Yeah. You know what's funny about that statement is that the downranking information part of it is actually sort of the minor part of it, if you ask me. This is a really behind the curtain statement. Like we learn here about how Joppa's vision and where that came from and when it started, you hear a lot of times. I mean, I guess maybe not everybody, because you don't pay attention as closely as we do, but you do hear in these discussions how, everything changed when Brad passed away. Things have changed, the course correction is done. And it's like, look at this, like, this is what he's saying. Like, that's not at all the case, like 2015 is, Brad was alive and well in 2015. And he even says it here, how his vision came to be imbued because Brad asked him to, what do you think about this? What is your contribution to this vision of this game that we're making? So the whole downranking thing is really sort of a footnote to this piece. It's very interesting. So what did you think about this?
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that's the key takeaway that in 2015, Joppa went and really made Pantheon what we see today. Like that was the moment. I mean, look at these things. Climates, atmospheres, artifacts, perception system, dispositions, mastery, and climbing. Before that day, none of it existed. And this is now 6 years ago.
Before that day, yeah, that's right. Before that day, it was an EQ clone, right? I mean, we can look at it that way because that's the other part of this discussion that's been thrown out. It's like, well, I thought we were just going to get an EQ clone, right? And it's like, no,
we're getting a game that's going to stand on its own 2 feet and be an MMO that's different from what other people have played. It's going to feel, some things will feel like it used to, some things will feel familiar, but this is going to be an adventure more than any MMORPG ever. I do believe that 100%. We'll see.
I agree with you. Yeah.
So topic 8, this is the last topic I'm going to bring up. It's a very quick hit, but it's on the Necro. So I'm sure our Necro fans out there would like to hear it, right? Yeah. So in case you missed this is the furthest one back, but still stands true. He says, quote, Necro will be CC and selfish DPS, primarily self-support with a dash of be careful what you wish for general support. He says Bard and Necro are on the tooltips right now for a reason, because Pantheon wouldn't be Pantheon without those classes.
Lots of happy corpse loving people out there right now who are happy to hear that. Careful what you wish for, CC. That is pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, sacrificing your own life, doing something that kills you, misdone, everybody dies. Like, I love that.
Yeah, summon some sort of wraith that like heals you for the next 20 seconds, but after that kills you and everyone in your party.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Pretty awesome.
So I hope you guys like that. It's understandable that sometimes it's hard to find some of these things, right? And these are all conversations had by Joppa to the greater community on the unofficial Discord. So it's all out there to find. You can search for Joppa in that Discord and you'll see his messages. But we hope it provides you guys some answers. We hope you enjoyed that. And in the future, if we find more of those types of things, we'll try to highlight it on the rewind. So we can try to keep people up to date as best we can. So Derek, what do you think?
I think we need to add this as a segment in the rotation, the dev tracker or the dev post recap or something like that.
Sounds good to me. Well, that is it for VR news and notes.
When the Pantheon community speaks, we listen. So let's dig into the forums and fan projects to see what the discussion's all about.
Okay, so this week, I want to highlight a discussion from the official forums, and this was by Ben and I, who we know. He said, with VR's focus on lore being such a foundational piece in gameplay and world building, Ben and I offered a pretty strong hypothesis about something, and it generated quite a bit of discussion. So here's what Ben and I's hypothesis is. He said, quote, knowing the lore in Pantheon will help you be a better player. So that is definitely a bold statement. There's always this sort of assumed disconnect between lore and gameplay, and this statement also asks us to define what being a better player actually means. So there's a lot going on here. It means, people who don't know the lore will be at a disadvantage if you believe what he's saying. It challenges our traditional concept of lore as like window dressing and again, not connected to gameplay. Here's one of the ways that Ben and I supported his theory. He said, quote, the perception system is built around this premise. There are secrets in the world that those who know the lore or find out tidbits will be able to uncover about locations, about bosses, about dungeons, and loot that would otherwise go undiscovered. He gave an example. He's written some articles, and hopefully if you've had a chance, you can read them at Pantheon.plus. He's connected some dotted lines between lore and where in-game loot might be, the best camping spots might be, some sort of like get you familiar with the world. He believes the info's out there, and he believes we can actually infer a good deal of what's in the game from it and go from what we know. The question is then, do you agree with this, right? Does lore knowledge make you a better player? Here's what some folks on the official forums thought. Minus, as always, as we go through these, just chime in as we go along if something jumps out at you. Chenzim said, knowing the lore doesn't make you a better player. Knowing your character's role and abilities, how they interplay with other players' abilities, and knowing how your opponents behave makes you a better player. Consuming and understanding the lore makes you a more rounded player. I would change the above statement to knowing the lore in Pantheon will make you a more valuable player. I can kind of agree with what Chenzim is saying here. It's a definition of what is better, like I said in the intro. In a social game, what does being better mean? Does that mean, your skills? Does it mean being valuable to others? Certainly that's one way of like quantifying yourself. So
it's a good point.
I don't disagree with what Chenzim says there. And the next one was from Disposalist. And he said, the lore will definitely inform your tactics, but I think people uninterested in lore will learn those tactics in a different way is all. And again, I think Disposalist makes a great point here. It's about how you learn the lore is going to be different for different people. Not everybody's going to just, read it. Not everybody's going to watch, my videos or something about it, but still about having that knowledge, right? Some people would just want to hear it from somebody else, or they'll want to, and it's not like reading a website. It's not what I'm talking about necessarily. I'm talking more about like, how do you learn the story of this thing, right? So I don't know, kind of an interesting point. Kane said, I hope paying attention to lore means something. If I find a book in Pantheon, I fully expect it has some information that will lead me to a hidden quest or a perception ping, or maybe a secret trainer with rare skills, learning a particular tactic against mobs, or like the secret location of a dungeon. Anyway, something tangible in the world. He says backstory is great, but I'm going to stop reading if it never amounts to anything tangible. He goes on to mention horizontal progression, something Minus you and I have talked about recently. And I think that sort of ties together nicely here, right? Tangible progression without resorting to like direct rewards, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, cool. Next up was Vandrad, and we always have fun things to say when Vandrad chimes in. He says, I have yet to play a game where an in-depth knowledge of game lore actually matters, or actually makes a noticeable difference, where knowing the lore of something versus not knowing it meant the difference between success and failure. When you distill the game down, it is all about the numbers, the equations, the algorithms that run the game. Are you doing more damage to the thing than it's doing to you? Are you killing it faster than it's killing you? So he goes on to say, sure, lore might play a part in quests, but only in explaining the backstory. And even then, I'll bet money it won't be necessary to intrinsically know it. People will figure out the meaning of something even without the lore. The game just won't be that complex. So, I respect what Vandrad's saying, and I think he's echoing what a lot of people actually think, but probably aren't, bold enough to say it. And we know Vandrad will say these things because he is not afraid to give his opinion. I'd be interested in running sort of an experiment where, if he was completely cut off from knowing anything about the world from a lore perspective, and if he felt he would be at a disadvantage from others in Pantheon, I don't know. I think he probably would, but
all right,
I respect his opinion too.
So I was going to wait till the end to really jump in hard, but I think this comment here is where I need to jump in hard. So
yeah
Vandrad, love you, buddy. So here's why it matters. Okay. It may not make Vandrad a better player. It might not. It might not make Vandrad more valuable because it's not where his value is. But what value he will get out of it is the people around him that are still playing the game because they're not bored of it. You see, this goes right back to what I've talked about multiple times on this show is when I played Rift. When Rift came out, I loved the game. I thought it had a really cool system for classes when it first came out. It's really watered down now. The leveling was cool. The dungeons were awesome. The classes were unique. There was a lot to do. And then I got to the first raid, which is, where the excitement's supposed to be, for my type of player, I guess you'd say. We get to this raid. I don't know why we're killing them. I don't care anything about what we're killing. And it seems boring to me because I don't have any connection to this dungeon or this event. It means nothing other than just kill something and get a reward. And that chased me away from the game. And I think that chased a lot of people away from the game. one of the reasons WoW is so popular and so successful is because of how important the lore is, how much people are invested in characters. And lore and backstory is what makes the world feel like something. And if people are going to log into a game and it doesn't feel like something, then they can log into any game and get that same exact feeling no matter how it plays. It might not be something that you immediately realize is important, but when you don't have it and you don't have that connection to a boss you're chasing who you hate, I can't wait till we get to a point where we can kill this boss. Or you save this character you love that you finally get to interact with, that you hear about. Like, for example, like coming across, what's his name? Janisova. Like coming across him is going to be really cool for me as a rogue already. Right. Like these things like Bel Iris. If you are out in the world and all of a sudden you see Bel Iris walking through the path of where you are, collecting information about spells or adventuring in the world to take it back to her, to her people, to the Wizard Council. That's really cool. That's a moment where you're just not just standing in an empty forest somewhere with just NPCs that don't matter. They're just placed there. Those things, and I joke about immersion a lot, but that is the core reason why you lock into a game, why you love a game. You don't just enjoy it, you love it. You're a part of it. You want more. You live in that world. And that is what lore does perfectly.
Yeah.
So
it's a great point. I mean, what you're doing is sort of taking that meta approach for somebody like Vandred who doesn't really, lore's not his thing, and that's fine. But he can't play the game if there's nobody else playing the game. You know what I mean? When you connect people through lore, it actually makes him a better player because he's able to play the game and become the better player that he, sees, that he defines it as. So,
and if there wasn't lore and meaning, he wouldn't keep playing. Yeah, I'm telling you that right now. He may not realize it directly, but he'd be bored.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that's a great point. I'm glad you jumped in there because that really counters what he's saying well and adds to it, not just much countering it, but yeah, it's really, really good point. Basgrim jumped in as well. He said, as recently as this month, Joppa said that the primary reason a player would choose to engage in perception is out of a curiosity for the lore. Those who do spend time in perception will likely have an easier time making sense of certain things in the world. Nothing so exclusive that everyone would feel the need to be a keeper. It's more of a social component. So if you don't care about the lore yourself, there may be some situations where it is beneficial to at least have a friend who's knowledgeable about the lore and can help explain to you what's going on. This is a great point that Baskin brought up. This is something Joppa talked about when we were playing in the evaluation build. And, again, we see that social component being raised, right? So we're just not used to an MMO with social aspects. It's really been taken out of the mix, and it's hard for us to conceptualize it. But I think that sort of speaks to that there. And it's a good point. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Adrenicus is said something which they alluded to in a previous video is that there's choice and consequences regarding perception system. So depending on how you react to the NPC or situation can lead to different outcomes regarding the quest or the perception line you're following. You could just read the different outcomes online, pick the best response that's most suited to you, but it adds replayability with alts and finding out different information. Only certain perception triggers, pinging dependent on your race, class, or faction, all adds to a more immersive world like you were talking about, Minus. And then he just finishes by saying most of this is part and parcel with single player RPGs, and I know it's a lot more difficult with MMOs, but even a small amount can go a long way. So he's referring to the flagging system and how it plays a part in this. And if you don't know the lore, you're going to be making choices that will affect the world, how it reacts to you. Like if you're constantly alt-tabbing out of the game to Google stuff, I think that makes you a liability in your group. Like let's say you come to a dialogue situation, right? And you've got to make a choice for your group, even for yourself. If you're concerned at all about how that might affect you later in the game, you got to go out and check, or you got to, you have to find it online if you don't know the lore. But if you know somebody in the group, or maybe somebody can tell you, if you pick this, it may have this impact, right? Think about Minus when you chose the Assassin's Guild, right? In Fortress de Air, right? That allowed you to get that quest. But if somebody had wanted that quest, didn't know the lore, they may have chosen the other option there, right? So it's sort of like, I think the flagging system does play into like can it make you a better player? It can make you a better player if you're going for a certain goal, if your determination of what better is certain a certain type of character, right? So
it's awesome. Yeah, no, when I got to do that Dire Lord quest, just because I picked Assassin, I thought that was awesome. That was one of the, like, other than us playing together, like the solo play session, that was one of my favorite parts.
Yeah, it was super cool. This last one, man, is just such a good example. I love this. This post was so good. This is from Levolen, and they said, knowing the lore when others don't should put a smile on the face of more than a few faces and leave others scratching their heads. How exactly that's achieved remains to be seen, but there have been psychology professors known to give out an assignment made for the first day of class with the instructions at the very top stating that you are to remain quietly seated with pencil in hand and that you're not to answer any of the questions. People who skip over the lore need to be made aware of that feeling, being tested on their intelligence only to fail from the get-go by doing more work than was required of them. Sort of that fool's rush in where angels fear to tread feeling, but not quite as severe. And along the lines of, the big print giveth and the small print taketh away. So, when I read this, I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly how I see it, right? Like, I just think when you don't read this fine print, you do things that don't make sense, or that you do things that are not inefficient, but you don't have to do it, or you could do it a better way, right? So what makes you a better player? Read the fine print. It can make you a better player, right?
Yeah. Good point.
Anyway. Yeah. And then I'll sum it up by quoting what JN said in his VIP roundtable when he was actually asked about this thread. And he commented he said, yeah, lore will be more than stories in our world. He said it's ultimately up to the player how much more it can be. So those who want more from it, perception will be valuable to those people. And to quote him again, he said, quote, we're constantly looking at, weighing, and thinking through the best ways to have story be an interactable object, to be its own NPC in the world. So I really like that way of looking at it. And, I know lore is sort of my thing, and I harp on it a lot, but I think this is a good question to ask. Does it make you a better player? And you said earlier, Minus, Pantheon's going to be a different type of MMO. It's an evolution. It's something new with new ideas. I think that this is a good example of that. But I'm glad Ben and I initiated this conversation too. Did you have anything else on this you wanted to add?
No, just, I've never considered myself a major lore person, but the more I've spent time with you and spent time with Chris Kane, who's reading through stuff and talking to the community about it when they're excited, and figuring out how these little lore pieces, further get you excited about your class or your race choice or the world, I started to realize I am a fan of lore. And it kind of, like I said, goes back to that same story I told you about Rift. And, I remember when we were in Legion, I was reading the first Chronicles book of World of Warcraft, which tied into like the whole, Argus and all that stuff that we were going through. Even though it was the first book, it was the first time in the game we were seeing that point. And it was weird because as we were sitting or getting ready for raid, I was telling stories about these bosses we were fighting, like in depth, because I was reading this book and getting so into it. And everybody really enjoyed it. Like, it felt really interesting to read all this lore. And here we are fighting against these things that have come back. And it added to the excitement. It's my favorite expansion I've ever played. And most people would say the older ones, but I loved Legion, and I can't help to think that it has something to do with digging into that lore and reading that Chronicles book at the same time we were hitting the pinnacle of fighting those major bosses. It was really neat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I would venture to guess it made you a better player in some aspect. Yeah. Even if you were just enjoying yourself more, that makes you a better player when you're into it, right?
True.
So yeah, good point. Right on. Okay, so let's move on and meet some new members of the community from the forums. Now, I mentioned earlier that the winner of our giveaway last week for the Legate Pledge was Rufius, and he did join the community. He posted on the forums his intro. He says, hello, just wanted to say hi to the community. This has been made available to me by the Pantheon Plus crew. Thank you again. I played EQ for more from 1 month before launch until Kunark was around in 2007. Was an officer in Coalescence on what I believe was still the Nathaniel Marr server at the time. Had fun grouping, raiding, exploring, and crafting. Looking forward to doing it again and getting that same lost in the world feeling. Been following Pantheon since summer of 2017 when I got an itch to play something like this again. And I like the direction VR is going, and I can't wait. Hope to see you all in game. So welcome, Rufius. Great to have you with us. Glad you won that pledge last week, and it's going to be a good time. So welcome.
Yeah, congratulations, man. Awesome. And happy we could get you further into the community for sure.
Yeah, right on. And then next up was Apricoth. And they said, hello, everyone. My online gaming name is Apricoth Diana. Been Apricoth since EverQuest 1 days. I've been lurking for quite some time, decided to move out of the shadows and wave to everyone. Longtime gamer of various types, including MMORPGs. Some of you may remember me from my EQ1 days on Terumar, which was their home server. High Elf Cleric was what they played. They said I was married to Spile. He and I divorced last year, so now I'm my own woman. Said I was also part of the beta testing of Vanguard Saga Heroes, played it when it went live for a while, and I'm happy to be here, thrilled to see Pantheon trucking along. So welcome, Apricoth, and that's it for this week's community discussions.
Here's the mail, it never fails. It makes me want to wag my tail. When it gets here, I just yell, mail! We're getting sued. All right, it's mailbox time. So we got 3 questions today to go over. So let's jump right in. So the first one is from Shahar. I think I said that right. Something I often think about when creating a character, they say. Do you care if a game requires lore-appropriate names for characters? Do you only want to see names that fit in the world around you as you are playing? Or is that not important to you? Now, I'll start with this one, Theric, if you don't mind, because I have a funny story here. This was a huge topic that came up in, I believe, the unofficial Pantheon Discord. And everybody was talking about names that should be good and, won't work. And it was just funny because we brought up the whole, like, do you remember back when we started playing online? It was like XX, Sephiroth, XX, and like Legolas. Legolas. Everybody was like different forms of Legolas. And I just think of like some of the names people make, like huge butt, huge ass or something like that. So like just stuff like that. Yeah. I always wonder people who make those names that are really ridiculous, like how quickly they regret it once they love their character.
Instantaneously. I don't know, man.
Once you hit max level and it's like, oh man, I kind of wish this wasn't my name. I want people to take me more seriously. So I don't know, because then it became this huge debate that minus isn't a good name. And I said, how do you figure it? And they're like, well, how do you know there's math? I said, because there's buildings and structure, there has to be math in some way. So got into this huge, is there math in Pantheon debate?
Oh my God. It was hilarious. Wow, that's a topic for the rewind all on its own.
Yeah, right. So, but it came right from this topic, which is pretty funny. And there was a guy in the chat that just kept banning people's names. As they would, they'd be like, how about this name? He'd be like, banned. How about this name? Banned. So it was kind of funny.
That's pretty funny. Yeah. And the question is like, how strict are you? How strict do you need to be? I'm like 1,000% yes on this question. Like I am totally bothered by stupid names, and I should definitely be more tolerant of it, but I'm not. And so, because I think like you said, like, what's the point of if you make a stupid, silly name, like remember we were talking, I don't remember where it was, but one of the warrior abilities in Pantheon is to be able to like break through a wall, right? And I thought, it'd be funny if somebody named her like their warrior, like the Kool-Aid Man, like you bust through a wall and be like, oh yeah, like that kind of thing.
I like the juggernaut.
So yeah, right. Somebody's gonna do that, but then again, you got to live with that name. Like what if you become like the best warrior on the server? What if you get some crazy world first and now you are Kool-Aid Man for all eternity, right? Like, wouldn't you rather have like a name that's like, I don't know, matches the tone of the game? Like I feel like Pantheon's got kind of a serious tone, not in all ways, but more so than like something like Project Gorgon. I don't know if you've played that or the listeners have played that, but it's very fourth wall breaking, kind of tongue-in-cheek humor in that game. I get it. Like if you played that and you had like a goofball name, but I think Pantheon deserves better, Oh,
so, my ex had a druid. So druid healers in the beginning, they had to turn into a tree. They went into tree form to heal.
Right.
And the name was Spruce Willis.
Spruce, yeah. It's like, it's endless.
You don't like
right?
that? That's a good one.
They're funny. They are funny. So that's why I'm saying I fight myself on this a little bit, because I do laugh when I hear them. I laugh when I hear Spruce Willis, or like gnomes, even EQ gnomes had some of the best names. I made a gnome. One of my alts in EQ was a gnome. And I thought it was hilarious that I named his first name was Warren, like the name Warren, but the last name was Peace. And I thought, Warren Peace, right? Oh, I'm so funny, right? I'm so clever. And I'm sure nobody else liked it, or nobody else probably even thought it was funny, but I did. And I still kind of enjoyed it. But all my mains, have to be like real serious names, like, or at least names that you would actually call somebody.
I told you the story about freaking small, right?
I think so, yeah.
When
Sounds
we were
familiar.
all playing and leveling a cleric, and my buddy got the name Free for his dwarf cleric, and he's like, I can't believe I got this name. It's the best name ever. It's so easy. It's such a good name. And then one of my buddies dinged 20 for the last name, not him, and made his last name Kinsmall because he was because he was a dwarf cleric. So he was Free Kinsmall, freaking small.
See, I don't mind that.
Those two didn't talk to each other he didn't talk to the main person who made the character didn't talk to that guy who made the last name for months. He never played the character again. He was so mad. Freaking small.
That's funny. That's funny. So yeah, I mean, I guess I have some tolerance for it, but overall, I'm like, no, it should be definitely lore appropriate. It should be, if not lore appropriate, at least not stupid. So judge that how you will.
Yeah. So this next question, Derek, we kind of talked about last week. I'm going to read it because it's slightly different. I don't know if there's more you wanted to add to it, but Rayu said, what would you consider as an ideal guild dynamics in Pantheon? And how do we go about creating them as players? So that part of it I like. He says also, what kind of in-game tools would you want to have? We talked a lot about that last week. I brought up the whole, I'd like to see tenure. I'd like to see more things manageable in game. Whereas Haya was like, it doesn't matter. Whatever we don't have in game, I'll just go use something outside. So he kind of ties into the whole guild loyalty topic, which we talked about that he said he liked. But he said guild dynamics seem to have a really defining effect on a server, for better or worse. So focusing just on that first question, how do we go about creating these guild dynamics as players? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I had an idea about this, and it sort of goes in hand with what you said about tenure. But what if there was like a limit to guild sizes, right? Like, what if you really capped it at a small number, not small, but a medium size
75, yeah.
50, something like that, right? Because I think what happens, the bad dynamics I think Ray was referring to is when you get these massive top dog guilds, right, that take up all the air in the game, and they get this power structure that you get on a server and you sort of you feel like you don't really matter unless you're a part of that, or you can never measure up, or you're just sort of some like weirdo that's never going to be like. I think when the guilds get too big, that's the issue, and I mean, I could be totally wrong. It's just an idea I had. I don't know, but
it's an interesting idea because it'll also create some chaos for guild leaders. Like, if you need 40 people to go to a raid and your cap is 60 and you have 20 people who don't want to raid, and now you can't get to the raids because certain people are not good, those spots become important. So now you're managing, like, I only have X amount of spots for my guild. Like, I can't afford to have this person. I can't, it gets a little maybe too chaotic or too, I can't think of the term I'm thinking about, like where people really don't like that elitist factor. Like people parts of, well, I'm not allowed to be in the guild because I didn't do this or that. It's an interesting thing to bring up because I think it would definitely create a very interesting dynamic to guilds. But it might create more bad than good at times. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I think I know what Ray was talking about, just wanting to build like good guild dynamics from both within and without, like what if you had smaller guilds and they all had to, alliances were more important then, right? Because to take on the biggest stuff, you need these alliances. What if you had to, it becomes more cooperative, not just from person to person, but guild to guild cooperative, right? So
that's a good point. Yeah. I agree with you. I think the huge guilds are like a bummer. Like I don't like them. I would never want to be part of them.
Exactly.
And you want to be a big guild and have millions of people in your guild that you don't actually know, have at it. But I would never be a part of that.
No, me neither.
The other thing too, just to consider is like when we talk about guild dynamics, it's like guilds wanting to have a different purpose. Like we're very clear that the purpose for the Plus guild is very different than what I think most people, even the people in our guild, have ever been a part of. And it's going to be very, very hard for us to pull it off. But we want our guild to be like a flag of community matters. We want our guild to be a guild that if someone's struggling or has a question, they can reach out to a Plus member. If there's an issue going on, we can come in to help. if there is a way for us to do server events and host different fun things to do, like from the Plus Guild, that's the kind of stuff we want to drive. Now, we're also going to really want to drive content on our own, and we want to see everything, but we want to focus more on like the server health, things we can do, and being that solid rock more than being like the best players, so to speak. And I think that's going to be fun. So.
Yeah, I know. I agree. Finding that balance between those things, finding the healthy dynamic balance between being able to do what some of the things you said, and also, focusing on being a community, right? Community first.
Yep. So last question here is from Brian Reck. He says, I wonder how mastery will affect things. Will epic spells have mastery options? With Shaman, can we see how mastery will affect the kind of spec for like a DPS versus a buffer versus a debuffer versus heals? What about other classes? Will mastery help them flex, like in dedicated DPS classes? How much diversity can be gained within the roles? So I'm going to actually say that I'm a little critical right now of the mastery system. I'm going to be completely honest with the way it's implemented right now. There's two pieces of the mastery system that I don't love. The first is the fact that we will be able to eventually get everything. I really hope that statement means like 1% of the player base can get to that point. Like that grinding, that's all they do, that's all they care about. Then I'm fine with that. But here's the part that I wish, and I know that VR isn't a huge team and maybe this is asking for too much, but there needs to be branches, and they don't need to be huge. Like if there's 3 mastery options you have, the first one should be a base one, and then you have a choice to make. On the second one, you can pick one of 2 and they lead into another one. So that's how I would do it. It would only add essentially 2 extra mastery for each spell they put mastery on. And yes, that's a lot of work in the grand scheme, but I think that's where you can really have that DPS versus buffer. So imagine you have an ability, and I'm just totally spitballing here, but the first thing makes it cost less mana. Now the second one you have to pick. Do you want it to have a longer cooldown and do more damage? Or do you want it to do less damage and have a shorter cooldown? You pick one of those, and then for the third mastery, it ties into whatever second one you picked. So, okay, you took the one with, less cooldown, and now, it can hit 2 enemies. You took the one with more damage, and now it, AoE's bigger. So and I know that's like the worst spit. I just literally off the top of my head tried to figure that out, and I'd have to sit down and actually think how it would work. But I do think that there should be more choice in mastery. Like for me, I like stealth. Putting 3 points into stealth means my stealth's better. There's no options to be had there. It's silly not to put 3 points in if I like stealth. So that's just my option. I would just like a tiny bit of choice in the mastery system. That means you have to make a decision, and that I would like a lot.
Yeah. If that makes sense. I mean, I think what you're saying, the choice part makes a lot of sense. I think the choice will what I think it will end up being is whether you go for those mastery points at all or not, right? Because like you said, they're going to be hard to get. What this question made me think about was, what we experienced in the evaluation build. And I think we can say that, we will feel mastery points. We'll feel them when you put them into your skills and your spells and your abilities. When we were playing, if you remember, Joppa asked us to like hold off on allocating our mastery points until we'd use the skill a bit first, so we could see how the upgraded version felt. This tells you, sort of gives you an insight into how they're focused on trying to make them as impactful as they can, right? Now, of course, I had already gone and spent all mine, so I didn't really get to do that because I kind of had to like whistle and go on my way when Joppa said that. I was like, I might have already put all mine in. So, but it tells you what they're thinking, and how they're sort of looking at this. So, like Brian Rex says, if you combine an epic spell, a spell that's already epic, with this incredibly impactful point, that's been doled out, or you've attained rather than just being doled out to you, you've got a system that's really exciting there. So I do think it feeds into your, being able to spec into a certain build, or even increasing your flex, like they talked about in the last dev stream there. Each class has sort of like a ability to flex into certain other roles for a short period of time. Maybe you can increase that flex time a little bit through your mastery decisions by which ones you go for.
Yeah, I just think when you're building a character, I think like when you think of D&D, you have, your strengths and your feats and stuff like that. And then you have your flaws. And that kind of to me is really important with building a character, is that if I just put 3 points into stealth, then I get everything stealth has. But if I have to make a choice, it means I have to sacrifice something I could have to have something that's better for me. And I think that not having any sacrifice, and you made a good point that, not being able to just get everything in mastery. So as stealth, I'm sacrificing perhaps one of my abilities that attacks or does more damage, which is fair. But I just like to think like, minus, do you have this ability? No, I kind of spec'd it into this instead. I like this more. I think is something that really helps with creating more dynamic building of your character.
Yeah, it's an interesting point for sure.
All right, well, that's it for the mailbox this week.
Sit back and relax. It's time for The Lore You Know.
Okay, so this week we finish our reading from the Book of the Availoth, which is the compendium of human deities, with the last of the 5 of contempt, Biri, the son of mischief. You'll recall we previously learned about his sister, Neri, the daughter of mirth. But Biri is quite distinct. Here's how his lore reads. The patron deity of the drunk and the thief, Biri is viewed not with the same instinctive dread as his 3 contemptible counterparts. Rather, acts of worship to Biri are more often than not unintentional, ignorant, and irreverent, but nonetheless destructive. They range from the youth lighting wicks tied to the legs of chickens, to pirate captains sinking unladen fishing skiffs for self-pleasure. Biri's defense is always that he's a harmless criminal, and yet his unwary devotees are oft left paying the price. Beneath his glee lies a scorn that begs to be revered and known, and it is to the heart that Neri pleads her brother abandon his mischief and join her in mirth. And that's the lore you know.
All right, Theric. So thank you for another great episode. We hope everybody listening enjoyed the show as always. And as always, let us know what you like. What do we do that you don't like? What would you like to see? You have an idea for the show? As always, throw it in the comments. Let us know. We're always looking to make this show better. Even with 50 episodes under our belt, we have a lot to learn, a lot to grow, and a lot more that we hope to excite you with. So Theric, as always, thank you for an amazing show. And unless you have anything else, I'm out of here.
No, I'm good, man. See everybody next week.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Be sure to follow Minus and all Pantheon Plus related content on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube under the name Pantheon Plus. Also, be sure to follow Theric at Pantheon Theric on Twitter. Keep up to date on all Pantheon Rise of the Fallen information on www.pantheon.plus, the definitive source for all media of Pantheon. Until next time.